This is the second part of our Truancy Prevention online learning event series presented by the Tribal Youth Resource Center. We are funded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and currently the Tribal Youth Resource Center is housed at the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. So welcome back to those of you who are able to join session 1, and if you are not able to join session 1, you can access those materials on our tribalyouth.org website. We want to take a little bit of time to let others join, and so if you would like to, please introduce yourself in the chat box. Feel free to say who you are and where you're joining from. If you have others joining with you, please feel free to share how many might be in the office with you today, and we're just really glad that you all are here. My name is Anna Clough. I work at the Tribal Youth Resource Center. I currently serve as the Assistant Director of the Tribal Youth Resource Center, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm joining from Oklahoma, right in the middle of the country, and I'm just really happy that those of you who have joined are able to participate today. We look forward to a great session. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Amber and Angela and Stephen. Welcome to all of you who are joining. I see a lot of familiar names in the participant list. Hi, Olivia. Looks like we have some teams joining. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Danita. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. Feel free to utilize the chat box throughout and continue to introduce yourself. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our facilitators today. Today's session is being facilitated by Ethleen Ironcloud Two Dogs and Tasha Fridia. Ethleen is one of our senior training and technical assistant specialists here at the Tribal Youth Resource Center. She's an enrolled citizen of the Oglala Lakota and also has Crow tribal ancestry. She resides on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. Her many blessings include her family and many relatives. Her consultant and volunteer work includes helping to strengthen children, youth, families, and communities using their own strengths and culture. She is currently the chairperson/director of the Graduate Studies Department at Oglala Lakota College. She is also a PhD student at Colorado State University. So I want to thank Ethleen today for being here and being one of our facilitators. Really grateful for her experience and what she brings to the Tribal Youth Resource Center. Tasha Fridia is also a consultant with the Training and Technical Assistance Center here at the Tribal Youth Resource Center. She serves as a consultant for TLPI. She is the owner of Fridia Consulting, and she assists tribes with strategic and justice system planning, code drafting, and policy implementation. She also serves as a senior associate at the National Criminal Justice Training Center for Fox Valley Technical College. Prior to her work with TLPI, she worked with the OJJDP Tribal Youth Program Training and Technical Assistance Center when it was housed at a previous provider. She is a recent graduate of Oklahoma City University School of Law, very active in the National Native American Student Bar Association. She has gained experience as a student in the Jody G. Marquette American Indian Wills Clinic. She held numerous leadership positions, including Student Bar Association Vice President, pupil of the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Inn of Court, and an appointment to the Dean's Council on Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion, where she helped establish a regalia policy for Native American law students. She served on the National Native American Law Students Association board and was awarded a Future Trailblazer in Indian Country by her local chapter. So we're really grateful for Tasha's experience and her being a part of the Tribal Youth Resource Center and being present on today's session. And we look forward to a really great discussion today. So with that, Ethleen is going to be giving a blessing and an opening for our session, and I'm going to hand it off to her.
Thank you, Anna, and welcome everyone. My name is Shina Ikiktumi, Takes the Robe Woman, Ethleen Ironcloud, Two Dogs. I'm Oglala Lakota and hailing from Porcupine, South Dakota. And I see in the chat box you're from all over, all the relatives. Thank you for being here. It's a very important topic. I'm going to ask the creator on behalf of all of us and on behalf of Native, Indigenous youth and families everywhere who struggle with truancy to bless this virtual gathering, but also to bless our youth and families everywhere and our communities. So I'm going to do that in my Lakota language. Tinkashila le ampetu wopila kanka geni chapi. Tinkashila daku imongwa kapiki. Oya kapik de hechel oyate iota wakhainja tchechapiki. Iwashte pikte tinkashila unshunkila tien wopila kanka echiche. Mitakuye oyasi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ethleen. The Tribal Youth Resource Center is a training and technical assistance provider for the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. We bring an in-depth understanding and appreciation of American Indian and Alaska Native history, custom, and Indigenous justice systems. And we as a team at the Tribal Youth Resource Center believe that our children are sacred, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're hoping that the materials and the resources and the presentations that we offer benefit you and your communities and allow you to continue serving the youth that you're working with in a good way. You can access materials and resources at tribalyouth.org. You can also access free training and technical assistance, which is available to any funded OJJDP grantee, as well as any federally recognized tribe. So we encourage you that even if you're not an OJJDP grantee currently, you're welcome to access the website and fill out a training and technical assistance request form if you're interested in any continued education from this session or really any other topic related to tribal youth prevention, intervention, or court-based services. You can learn more about OJJDP at www.ojjdp.gov. There you can learn about resources, materials, and also access funding opportunity information. So we encourage you to visit our site as well as ojjdp.gov anytime. I'm going to let Laura introduce our tech information today.
Greetings all. So glad you're here with us. My name is Laura. I'm the program assistant with the Tribal Youth Resource Center, and I'll be walking us through a few logistical notes to make our time together go as smooth as possible. So first thing to note is that all attendees will be muted during this presentation, and there are a couple ways to participate. One way is you can type into the questions box on your panel to submit questions and then responses. You can also participate by typing into the chat box. Periodically, some questions will be posed, and you can share your thoughts at any point by sharing in that chat box, and everyone will see it. Finally, we have several handouts that are available for download, and those are available in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. There's a bar that says Files, and all of those handouts are available there, including the slides from today's presentation.
Thank you, Laura. So we wanted to give a brief recap of Session 1. Thank you to those who were able to join Session 1. If you weren't, like I said before, we will house archived materials on the tribalyouth.org website. But briefly to discuss what came out of the first session was a discussion about defining truancy and chronic absenteeism in different communities. We learned that there were a number of ways to define truancy and that those are based on state and tribal specific ordinances or code. We know that youth are required to attend school. Compulsory education is required in all 50 states. And that generally individual codes will address truancy and chronic absenteeism in each community. So as a developing program, it would be important to know what your state law, what local tribal law, and what the definitions may be for the students that you're working with. We discussed risk factors and consequences related to truancy, and we know that American Indian and Alaska Native youth face some of the hardest situations, history of trauma, and engaging with the American education system. That we know data and research indicates that American Indian youth are facing a number of struggles in the education system, including low performance and high rates of absence in school, both truancy and chronic absence. We discussed the need for collaboration with communities, families, parents, administration, and implementing a comprehensive approach when developing a truancy prevention program. And we discussed restorative and trauma-informed approaches when developing a program. We also noted that punitive approaches are ineffective and that holistic and well-rounded programs often include referral processes that support broader issues that youth may be facing when you're trying to develop an enhanced truancy prevention program. So with that, we're really happy that today the discussion is going to include some presenters that are actually working with youth in a truancy prevention program. And Tasha is going to be introducing our guests today who will be presenting. And then we also will have an open discussion period where we will discuss another program. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So with that, Tasha, I will pass it off to you, and you can introduce today's topics and presenters.
Ashita Sheetsock, this is Tasha Friday. I am Wichita, Kiowa, and Caddo from Oklahoma. I'm so happy that you all are joining us. So for our presentation topics today, we are going to listen and engage in a facilitated dialogue with the Pascua Yaqui Tribe's Attendance Achievement Program. It's a really great program to highlight, and so I know that we'll all have some great takeaways and questions for them. And then we'll compare and contrast successful strategies that are implemented to support local tribal youth and engage cross-country and educational partners. And again, the Pascua Yaqui model is really great in looking at collaboration. Then we will discuss implementation of an effective truancy prevention program within the local community. And of course, we've just had a brief overview of truancy in Indian country. So one thing that we would do is, think about these topics while we're having our discussion and really try to look back and internalize them and think about ways that you could mirror or parallel some of these strategies within your own communities. I think that will add to our conversation and our ability to collaborate with one another. And so those are the topics that we're going to discuss today. Now I'll go ahead and introduce our distinguished guest presenters. Again, they are from the Pascua Yaqui Attendance Achievement Program. This is a really great program, and so we're excited that they were able to share and come on to the learning event today, and we know that it will be useful for you. So we have Johanna Farmer, who is an enrolled member of the Rosebud Sioux Tribe. She's worked for the Pascua Yaqui for 10 years in various capacities, and her work is tribally driven and culturally relevant approaches with an emphasis on intervention. And so a lot of the work that she does is centered around what is known as the Tuahe initiative nationally, but she works with the Attendance Achievement Program within the tribe. And then she is a graduate of the University of Arizona School of Law, and she is barred with the Arizona State Bar Association. Joining her today is her colleague Annette Leva, and she is the Attendance Achievement Program Administrator. She has worked for the Pascua Yaqui Tribe for 14 years. He is very adept at identifying and filling gaps in services for families within the community. She does a really great job of matching student needs with available resources. and she has a commitment to quality of life through the empowerment of educational enrichment. And I think that underscores not only her philosophy, but the work that they both do. So with that being said, I would like to turn it over to these wonderful ladies to lead our discussion.
Good morning. This is Annette Leva. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And we would also like to start off by sharing our gratitude and thanks to the Tribal Law and Policy Institute for the services that they provide all of the tribes to empower the work that they do, and they value the work that they do for our families and children. And it is an honor for Johanna and I to be able to provide a little bit of our passion, our heart and soul and purpose with you today. And I hope that you're able to connect and identify some key areas that could inspire or plant a seed for growth or strength in all of the valuable work that all of you participants do with your families. So with that, we look forward to sharing and engaging with you, and also drawing from your experience and skill base to help enhance the work that we do, and we continue to strive to enhance the quality and delivery of what we do. And thank you for that beautiful blessing. And I'd also like to share, a blessing to all those who take time out of their day. We all know that there's so many things going on to grow and strengthen your skill by learning, and knowing that lifelong learners are able to provide the best quality for all of the services that we provide. And I hope that that renews your spirit and your purpose to continue the drive that we all started out doing in another in our lives. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and start with the Attendance Achievement Program that was co-created by Johanna and myself back in 2012. And looking at the heart of the Attendance Achievement Program is having the ability to not identify that families don't necessarily come in a department, or that truancy has a silver bullet, that there's one area that can address a certain issue. We have to all come together and be creative enough as the challenges do come. Looking at the mission, AAP not only identifies but addresses the root obstacles to school attendance, and then what we do is work at harmonizing the resources that the Bascoyaki tribe has available for families to enhance their overall well-being and let the natural advancement of education take root naturally in itself. So looking at that whole philosophy and approach, that was our practice coming into identifying that practice, and then moving forward on looking at why we need to move forward in doing it. So I just wanted to remind everyone that as we do the presentation, that you're welcome to ask questions throughout. So in a nutshell, this is the steps that we approach looking at not only what we need to accomplish and our outcomes that were desired, but also who are we serving and what kind of system do we need to structure, and the framework that is user-friendly for our families and youth to help them identify when they are navigating a system within the government entity, that they know where they're at and they have a sense of control and a sense of purpose while they are accessing services to help empower them as well. So that was important to us in looking at how could we create something so comprehensive with the least amount of steps and red tape possible. So we condensed it down to an order of 3 steps. Now those 3 steps have a set of goals and objectives in each one of them, but to help families identify where they're at and look at the process and help them look at their steps becoming successful, we wanted to make sure that those 3 steps were easy enough for them to feel like they could follow and it wasn't overwhelming for them. So our first step is working with families to identify strengths and challenges. That is one of the key areas because being a family-focused, strength-based approach, that is one of the biggest aspects that we value at our core, working with families and understanding. We are striving at using research-based practice, but in a cultural methodology, and enhancing their outcomes. We need to create supportive and healthy relationships with them, and more than that, on the back end of what we're trying to do in that organizational level is more of a triage and a roadmap and a compass. All of that is taking place while we're engaging with families, and we're trying to identify where they're at in a culturally responsive manner by being trauma-informed in a non-judgmental environment. So we're trying to gauge all of those pieces are happening during that first step. And that's where we can identify any risk factors and the immediate needs, and at that point, any responses and connections that we can do for short and long term. So that whole first step is creating the framework of our relationship with them, and then also the structure of the levels of support that we need to provide. So for instance, if there's a family that might have low risk indicators, we might not be pulling in every resource that the tribe offers, but we're identifying at that point what is being self-identified through basic intakes, or if there's a need to elevate those services into formal assessments given by our behavioral health teams or by other assessments that we have within the program. The second step is we create an achievement plan, and that's basically looking at another evidence-based practice. When we go back to basics of achieving a goal, achieving all of those things, we kind of go to those core SMART goals. And not only are we applying this practice to them to help them identify areas that they could work on within the program, this is a life skill that they could apply for any other goal, any other areas of improvement in life. And this practice is then provided to the parent and the student so they could use that in their own lives and wherever they feel that they'd like to apply their goals to. So that's basically the heart of the program, is identifying where they're at, step one. Now step two is where are we going? And that's where we look at the next 6 to 9 months, knowing that change takes time. If we reflect on how easy is it for us as adults to make some changes in our lives, we can see that sometimes it's very challenging when these practices are families getting identified for having some truancy risk factors, and they might not even understand it or reflect themselves that it is an issue. So this development of change does take time in that cultural sense to help families understand the cycle or those generational or historical awarenesses of what that perception of education is and those outcomes. So that whole second step is taking that elephant and breaking it up into bite-sized pieces, and we're able to break it down to tasks and time-oriented views to help them become successful. We also have a number of prevention services that the tribe offers that are not necessarily intervention. We have tribal library, and there's also a lot of recreation, health, teams, leagues that we also embed into their plan to expose. I know for us in particular, a lot of our families might not be engaged in a lot of the services that the tribe offers. So what we try to do is also expose them to some really great things that other departments are doing to help provide some of that space to build resiliency and connecting to other components within the tribe. So then that plan is then created, and then step 3 is where all the work begins. That's where the support and navigation systems begin to help families achieve their goals. So this is where the whole roller coaster begins, where now it's kind of walking the walk, where we were talking the talk in the beginning, just kind of learning and engaging, daydreaming and putting all these great aspirations on a wall. And now here is where we actually do the work. And what we try to do is invert a lot of the delivery of services. So what I mean by that is we internalize a lot of the networking and hoop jumping that a lot of families feel like they face sometimes when they have to access services through the tribe. So what we do is we invert that, and we broker, call, navigate, and access services for families to help ease them into that transition. We feel like that is one of the biggest challenges that families face if they feel like they have to attend or provide certain information or certain intakes. It's an apprehensive feeling that they get. They feel that there's that sense of insecurity to go and then start that process all over again. So what we do through our intake process is those consents, permission forms, releases of information that allow us to do cross-functional work across the departments. So this information isn't just in our file, in our file room. It's actually being utilized and live and active to cross those departments to be able to ease that access to those services for our families. So that's one of the other areas that we have started with, is to invert that system for families to ease that access of services. Piloting the program, so kind of going back to what I have said about Johanna and I co-creating this, I had been there for the tribe for 14 years. Johanna had been working in prosecutor's office, I in education, and then looking at the heart of where both of us in our work for families and youth are looking at potential possibilities of coming together and accomplishing bigger aspirations for our tribal community members. We put this program together and presented it to our tribal leadership at the time, and thankfully enough, they saw the value and the concern that our tribe was facing, so we were allowed to start with the piloting program. And this is where, at the heart of the map that we created and that framework was the piloting project, and how we were able to springboard that into where AAP is and hopefully where it can transition to become. So looking at a lot of what Anna said in the beginning of the presentation, which is spot on, is punitive versus restorative when it comes to a lot of youth services, when it comes to a lot of truancy-related or even court-related families. We really do need to restore. And I think that was the biggest challenge when there was truancy ordinances put into place that could be either civilly or criminally pressured. The last thing that a family needs that are struggling with truancy, we know that is an indicator that there might be a whole lot of things going on. So handing them some handcuffs or some court fines was probably directing away from what our outcome was. So what we needed to do was move into the other direction and identify what those key factors were and come in that restorative manner to be able to help address some of those issues for a sustainable outcome for our families. We didn't want to create a system of entitlement or enablement where they had to access us every school year for the rest of their duration of their educational experience. We wanted to empower them for them to move on and then to look at the potential when they're parents themselves and the future students that they raise. Solutions-based, that was one of the biggest areas. I know that when some meetings that are held historically with, schools or with departments or even with families, the big focus was the problems. And all that was creating rabbit holes of other problems and other factors and other elements and the loss of control that we have to address that because we were just kind of looking at the big problem because that pot was kind of overboiling there on the stove. So to kind of shift our focus into, yes, we know that this is an issue, but how are we going to solve it? And then after that, how could we break it down? And then after that, how could we make it better? Was one of the biggest areas that we internally challenge ourselves with every issue that comes in our cross is to identify those solutions to those problems. Looking at historical experience working with our families, we saw that there was a lot of compliance that took place with some of our departments that, and it was the underlining goal was to engage families. However, yeah, there was a lot of compliance. And what we wanted to really focus on, especially with families that were experiencing issues at this capacity, was to actively engage them, not only in the structure of AAP, but to help them actively engage in the school system that their children attend, for them to feel like a school isn't an outside entity that they are not a part of. For Pascoyaki in particular, we don't have a K-12 system right now, so our children attend schools outside of the reservation. So there is somewhat of that fracture that some of our families might feel that it's not tribally connected where that active engagement is there. So we help identify areas where what is active engagement in a school for a parent, what does that look like? And how could we help them feel successful enough where they could understand that? And, where it comes back to even digging a little bit deeper and perhaps even identifying what was their experience as a student themselves. Did they complete school themselves? And how do they feel successful enough to be able to engage in a school system for their children? That was another huge piece that we needed to make sure that was part of our piloting program. And then that partnership with that family and understanding that to be that broker, to be that advocate, and also to help them understand that learning process needed to take place for them to be able to then continue the practices to be successful in the goals that they have identified to be able to move forward. So that partnership was definitely that huge piece. Now I'm going to rewind. I apologize. I'm going to go back to active engagement because I see that was another big piece for us with the piloting of the program. Was also engaging departments that weren't youth service directed. So I can, and even not, and even so, there's like housing was one, and then looking at other aspects with our wellness centers, our health department. All of these areas, we really needed to bring that active engagement piece to and see what we could come together and make that an issue and a concern that we all wanted to move forward on. So in other words, truancy wasn't just an education concern. It wasn't just a law enforcement concern. It was affecting our community as a whole. So that active engagement just didn't include our families, but it also included our tribal government families and bringing them together at our government and having them approach our families
as a family so we could all come together as one collective unit to help serve our families. And now I can jump over to accountability, which kind of goes hand in hand with that active engagement, is equally to a family getting a knock at the door or a visit from, a school resource officer, or be notified that there was a citation or a referral sent for truancy. That feeling of accountability has been, instilled in them. We're going through the process of understanding that was huge for them. And so what we're doing with this whole process, it kind of feels like, in a sense, like a spotlight has been put on them that's identifying all areas or issues that they might be facing in their family. And that could be a really stressful time for them. And so that was one of the pieces that we had to be mindful of working with our families. But then also, this program also reflects that light to our government entities. And in that sense, it's when we're learning from families that they have been trying to access services, or services haven't been followed through completely, or that there's been challenges accessing services. What we do then is also navigate and directly work with our departments on how we can enhance the delivery of services to them. So that accountability is all across. At times we find that there are some challenges happening at a school system where advocacy needs to take place. There's students that are reported an excess number of absences, and in fact we go and find out that maybe that child is just a really quiet student in the back of the class and has been marked absent for 15 plus days, and we're able to prove that through schoolwork and active engagement in the classroom. However, those absences were documented. So what we do is try to level that accountability in the most equitable way possible for our families. And that's kind of the practice and what we have done in moving forward. So now what I'm going to do here is pass it over to Johanna to move forward with our who in our program and our roles and the important aspects and what they face. So I know that...
Johanna and Annette?
Yep. Go ahead, Ethleen.
Sorry. This is Ethleen. Thank you for that information. We have a question about addressing youth who are on the verge of expulsion due to truancy and in-school misbehavior. You might be covering that in a later slide, but do you have any comments on that now?
Definitely, and I know that has been a huge issue, and I know that was a key area with some of the leadership when we had presented the program in the beginning. They had approached us and said, are you ready for this? This program is comprehensive, but are you ready for the challenges that are going to open up? And that was one of the key areas where I want to say that Santana that has addressed. Another area is the IEP issues with exceptional education, where our kids have been going through that system of education and have lacked those services that they've needed. That is a huge issue, and it could have many factors where families feel like they are getting pushed out in a way, and those suspensions do take place. I know here in the school system that we have majority of our kiddos in, 10 days in a row, you're automatically dropped. So our kids actually have to re-enroll into school. So we have dealt with many issues that have had that expulsion or the in-school misbehavior, and especially when kids have not been actively in school, sometimes for years, and then are now put in a system where they are in school regularly. Those misbehaviors and tardies start happening before that modification of behavior or acclimation to the school environment do take place. And I think that's the huge areas where we connect with other departments within the tribe to help share the concerns and the burdens that are taking place, because it is a huge area. So when I say family members, government family members, we refer to education, we refer to our behavioral health systems, and we bring them to the table and we seek them out as family members for these youth and ask them, how could we address this issue? What could we do to come to the table to either visit them in school or work with an advisor at the school, create a behavior plan, connect with family. I know that there are some areas where we do advocate and provide a plan together that has a contract with that will lead to that accountability phase. But the last thing that we want to move towards doing is expulsion or suspension, especially when our goal is the outcome is the opposite, is to help put them in a learning environment longer. So I don't know if that has addressed your issue, but we definitely seek outside resources within the government, and then we advocate and create those partnerships with our school staff to help better understand what are their needs. If we know that misbehavior is a huge issue, then what is their recommendations for solutions, and then how can we look out of the box to seek those out, and then look through our partners within the tribe to help make those connections. I know at some point we even have some of the extreme behaviors. We have connected these kids to behavioral health services that have opened up behavioral health services for even in-school support. They're not counselors, but they're mentor advisors that have actually been able to spend hours a day in school with them, that are able to help them diffuse or manage behavior in the classroom. So what we do is we really look at creative ways to overcome challenges that our kiddos face. Ethleen, is there another question?
Thank you for that. I do see that Stephen King is making a comment about the importance of language preservation, and I'm just wondering, he didn't ask a question, but I was thinking that it would be good to know if and how language is integrated and included in the program services.
Thank you for that, Stephen. That is definitely a huge element, and our language and culture department within the system that Johanna oversees, I know that she's even increased a staff member in the language and culture department to help support a lot of initiatives to enhance the delivery of cultural related content in our practice as well. So I know that that's huge to be able to reflect that. And they do, language and culture does have services that they provide for younger age children and teenagers as well that we try to engage the kiddos in AAP in. It is a challenge because, again, our kids are naturally come into our program disengaged. They come in with that disengagement in school is not just school. They're naturally disengaged in a lot of other areas too. So connecting them to these programs definitely do enhance those outcomes for them. I know the education department has also worked with the two school districts in the city, and they have created a credit language classes that are at the capacity for dual credit for their graduation. So I know our two school districts have are the Yaqui language courses 1 and 2 in those school districts, which was a huge impact for our youth, and I know that our kiddos are taking advantage of those courses at their school as well.
Thank you for that. I don't see any other questions or comments.
Okay, Ms. Johanna Baum.
So as Annette was talking about accountability, one piece of the accountability is that partnership that we have with our other programs, agencies that we work with, and we did recognize that it was imperative that we work as a community to collaborate and share resources. One critical component necessary for effective truancy programs is collaboration. And for us, collaboration involved creating a broad-based, multidisciplinary partnership between the agencies and programs whose involvement impacts truancy directly. The collaborative partners that you see listed on the screen are those that are directly involved in the truancy process here at the tribe. There are another number of partners that are not listed that Annette had referenced that are utilized as resources once a family has been identified as struggling with truancy. Although a family could enter through AAP voluntarily, most of the families that AAP works with are referred to the program through a partnership with schools, police, and the prosecutors. As Annette had mentioned, there are no schools on the reservation. Well, there's one charter school on the reservation. All other schools are off reservation, but all of the schools are not tribally controlled. This meant for us that there needed to be a mechanism for the tribe to work with these students. So the Paskuyaki tribe passed a truancy code, which you can find on the website. So I'll briefly discuss the role each of the partners has that is on the screen. Schools identify if a student resides on the reservation and whether absences are causing a burden to academic progress. They then will refer them to the police department, and law enforcement creates a citation form that they give to the prosecutor's office. Parents are cited if the youth is in elementary school, and youth are cited if in middle school or high school. This determination for us was made based on what we usually found to be the underlying cause of truancy issues in younger versus older youth. The prosecutor's office contacts AAP staff to review files, and the file review determines if the family should enter the program through either the diversion track or through the court track. If a family is selected for diversion, then the citation is just held in the prosecutor's office and is not charged unless the family doesn't successfully comply or complete AAP. The court track that we do have does provide additional structure and support for families who have a chronic pattern of truancy. We like to have the lowest level of interaction that a family can have with the court. As Annette had discussed, AAP's role in the truancy process, and also when she discussed, how we do what we do, it really is restorative. So we do try to keep them out of the court process as much as possible. We do, though, need to partner with the court for those families that have persistent challenges or who are not responsive to the other interventions that we do have in place. Besides those partners that are directly linked to truancy, we also partner with the Language and Culture Department, Behavioral Health, Wraparound Services, CPS, and Workforce Programs. We want to be able to have a relationship with every program or service that families could benefit from. In building our partnerships, we believe it is vital to keep regular communication and be transparent. So any data, successes, or challenges that we experience, we share with our partners in order to engage them. It helps to keep them engaged in the process as we continue to build the Attendance Achievement Program. So I do see that Shirley's asked a question about whether parents are included in all of the engagements. We do try to include parents at all levels when we're talking about once they actually enter into the Attendance Achievement Program. And then we also do exit interviews with parents in order to see what other things that we could have done to improve the Attendance Achievement Program to provide a better service for their family.
Yeah, and I could also go into that. Areas that we do help with the engagement of parents is in that beginning phase and creating that relationship with them. And then it would determine on the age of the child. If it was a younger child, we would definitely engage them a whole lot more, providing parental guidance and support to identify challenges that they see that are happening within the home and try to address those. If they're parents of teenagers, we'll also try to identify what challenges face, but looking at moving forward on a long-term basis, we really do want to invest a lot more of our efforts with our youth to help them understand the power of choices that they're making in their lives and to help develop those pre-adolescent, early adult phase responsibilities in their life. We also do try to provide any types of workshops that we see are a theme that are happening within the community. and engage them as well as other services that the tribe is offering at that time to connect families to. And one of the areas that we do is, I know it's a wellness wheel, is just kind of helping parents understand like all of the stress and burdens that they're carrying coming into the program and where they're putting most of their efforts. So a lot of it is engaging them, but just valuing them as a parent and the phenomenal job that they're doing right now and supporting them definitely helps the engagement piece move forward, that they see we're only connecting them to services we feel will enhance them versus a compliance phase that they have to attend, a workshop a week for the next 8 weeks kind of structure. We really do want them to see that we value their time, and the engagement we have for them is mandatory, but it's definitely something that is made just for them.
Go ahead.
I'd say, Shirley, if you have, so Shirley, if we didn't, answer your specific question, please feel free to clarify it some more, and we can expand more on how parents are included in engagements. I do see that we have another question about what types of interventions are completed by schools prior to going to law enforcement. So they have in the past, the schools have done interventions that include, phone calls, letters. As I had kind of said, referenced, and Annette had too, is that there are no tribally run schools, and because of the education laws, the particular schools that we deal with require there to be a mechanism for there to share information with us, which is why the attendance achievement program was formed the way it was. The only way that the tribe could get information about these students was that truancy code that we have that allows for the schools to refer to law enforcement, and then law enforcement is able to engage in any services that they feel may benefit the families that they're working with regards to truancy.
Yeah, so I know going back to that, the interventions that a school provides, when we had first started the program, we did require that 3 documented interventions take place at a school level prior to referring over. And the reason why we did that was because at that time, the attendance achievement program did not have the capacity to divert a citation. So the citation would be processed, and we would be that diversionary plea agreement or alternative plea agreement for a family, but a citation would be documented at that time. Since then, we've moved to where AAP has the capacity to divert the citation to even have it reflect in the court system. So from there, we also noticed that the decline of names that were provided to the tribe from our kids had declined. And when we addressed that with our school systems, they basically said the number of kiddos that they have with number of truancy issues, they just don't have the manpower to be able to handle that capacity of interventions. So at that point in time, we needed to then move some more kind of mountains, if you will, on our side to be able to allow for them not to have any interventions prior to sending them over. All that we asked is that we were going to use the school's discretion in identifying kids that might have attendance issues that are burdening their academic progress, or that have a historical issue with attendance and during the beginning of the school year are then displaying that behavior again, to please provide us that information. So in looking at how could that be perceived as punitive because it was given straight to our police department, in our sense of seeing it, it was the earliest point of intervention, the better. The sooner part of the school year or the sooner part any of these behaviors are arising gave us more opportunity to work with families. So we had to alleviate schools or recommending schools, requiring schools to have formal interventions prior to giving us that information.
So we did have a few more questions, and we will answer those questions during the question and answer time. We're just going to get through the last two slides that we have here for the presentation, and then we will address the other questions at the end. So as Annette had kind of talked about when she talked about the mission, you know, in order to build and continue to keep the support of our partners and leadership, it was imperative for those of us that created the program, Annette and I, to have that solid why. Giving people a compelling why helps them understand and buy into the bigger picture of the work that we're doing. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it. For example, you know how to process an application for a client or submit documents to court. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean a result like few or you cited for truancy. By why, I mean what's the purpose? What's the cause? Why does your program exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? People explain what they do and how they do it, but forward-thinking people start with the why. When people think, act, and communicate from the what, they start with what they understand the clearest. But our brains don't work that way. The little bit of science that I know I'm going to share with you guys right now about brain science is that the neocortex, our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language, the what. Our limbic brains, like the inside of our brain, are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision making, and it has no capacity for language. So when we talk about the why first, we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things that we say and do. That is the why inspired leaders and inspired organizations all think, act, and communicate first from the why. So what we're sharing here on this slide is our why. The philosophy of the program comes from this belief we are able to create a healthy and cohesive relationship with our families by being respectful and understanding of the strengths and challenges each individual family faces. Once a relationship has been built, we're able to provide parents with proper tools and resources to support and encourage education for their children. Because truancy often indicates bigger problems in a child's life, responsibilities, resources, and information need to be shared across departments in order to address the needs of family. We do recognize that change takes time, as Annette had said, and an educated child will help sustain and strengthen the sovereignty and self-sufficiency of the tribe. In our final slide, we just wanted to share with you what we felt would be kind of like the core pieces when someone were to implement a truancy program. So at a minimum, and depending on the size of the population that you're looking at serving, we would suggest having a service coordinator who can help families to navigate services in their plan and to work with partners. We also would recommend someone like a family facilitator, someone like Annette, who administers the program but also does work with a family from getting them into the program to assessing their strengths and challenges. We would recommend that you create forms and have MOUs with services and with schools. We also would say that it would be important to have a mechanism to collect data, even if it's just an Excel spreadsheet. I've heard this before, and I always tell people that I work with, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. And that's why data is such an important thing. In addition to the people on the paper that you would need to implement a pilot, we would recommend that you have a flow chart for the process. How are the families going to come through the program? How are you and your partners going to work together? And then one final recommendation for process would be a code to support the program and the process that you have in place.
Yeah, and I think that's those areas that Johanna covered definitely packaged the deal and exactly why we did it and why we needed to put these elements and pieces together looking at when we developed AAP, there was a hope and aspiration that this program wouldn't be a lifelong program within the tribe. We were hoping that this program would be able to help be so effective that it would actually bless the community to help, address some of those root issues that our families face, where we could transform into a more of a system that could provide enrichment, enhancement, but wouldn't be at the critical level of truancy. So I know that that was one of the big key areas, but for us to do that and knowing the elements that you face in any organization, we wanted a system to outlive us in the case that jobs or situations change. We needed that consistency for our families first and foremost, regardless of our role in this tribe or in this organization. We needed this service to be able to be something that our kids and our families could come to depend on if they felt or if they fell into this capacity that they needed these services for the tribe.
And I know this is just, like a real brief overview. We've talked for about a half an hour about the Attendance Achievement Program, but both Annette and I will share our information and make ourselves available for people who, if you have more in-depth questions about how an Attendance Achievement Program could be adapted to fit into your community, we definitely can have a conversation with you about your how, and we can look at what pieces you have in place and what we would suggest for how you would implement the Attendance Achievement Program. The Attendance Achievement Program we adapted our program from was a truancy program that was school-based. However, we weren't able to have a school-based program based on the educational laws that are in place currently. And so we had to utilize that code to be able to implement the Attendance Achievement Program in the form that it currently exists in.
Well, thank you so much. We have some questions. This is Ethleen. I really appreciate all of the information you've shared so far. I realize I really agree with your comment about, this is a very brief time and we could probably spend all day picking your brains. And I would really like to see on the last truancy webinar last week, then there was a comment about having, like a conference just on truancy in Indian country. And I think that's such a good idea because we really need to, share information, help each other. But there's a couple questions here. Does your tribe have access to the school's student information system so you are able to view student attendance reports remotely?
Good question. Right now, currently, the education department works with the larger school districts, and they create an intergovernmental agreement that allows the exchange of information of our students. That takes place for any type of information that a parent would allow the tribe to access that information, but they do not access that remotely. They would get that upon request or at the end of every quarter or semester. And the education department does a great job of connecting any type of interventions or incentives that our students are then reflecting or earning throughout that school year.
Okay, thank you. Another question was, what type of interventions are completed by the schools prior to it going to law enforcement?
So I kind of touched on that earlier, and we based it on the resources that the school has available at that time. Sometimes we come across where the attendance clerk at the school is the only person that is designated to either address attendance issues on top of the reporting tasks that they have going on. So when we see that these issues are escalating with little to no change, we'll then make direct contact with that school and say, hey, if there's no interventions or you're having no luck, these phone numbers are disconnected, or if you make home visits and there's no outcomes, send the information to us. The sooner the better in this case. now that AAP has reached a capacity where we divert a citation, we are uber restorative. So at that point in time, that active engagement with the schools and that partnership is vital to us making early contact with that family to try to prevent any extenuating situations occur.
Thank you very much. There is one last question, suggestions about how to replace prosecutor involvement.
So I think we would really have to look at the relationship that the tribe has with the school. I think if you were able to have a AAP staff member in the school doing that truancy intervention at the school level, you would never need to involve law enforcement or the police department. So I think it does depend on what the relationship is you have with the school, and then if you don't have that ability to have that relationship with a school, is there an ability to do an intergovernmental agreement with the school where you would place a staff member in the school doing the attendance achievement program work? Or can you enter into something as simple as an MOU or MOA with the school in order to provide that intervention at the school level instead of the way that the Patliyaki tribe does it?
And even at this capacity, we do have the prosecutors, and they were one of the active partners in the beginning. And at this point, AAP is that diversion. We do find when families do escalate their situation where they do get involved with the prosecutor's office, our prosecutor's office is super innovative and restorative as well, and they provide that direct contact and access to AAP once again. So if families did not successfully complete AAP on that diversion process or track, what they do is once they get into that court system, they again allow them to enter into AAP with just that more structured system where they need to participate in these areas. Because at this time, it's not just AAP that they're wanting them to comply with or connect with, but AAP is made up of all tribal resources. So at that point in time, it's just putting them back into that structure to help provide that restorative environment to them again. So I know prosecutors kind of can sound scary at times, but what we do is we work really hard with our law enforcement and prosecutors and court systems to remain as restorative as possible. And even in those cases, I've been called in by a judge to sit with them prior to a hearing with a family and get firsthand narrative on what is taking place with this family and what are these recommendations before they work with that family and potentially extend their case. So we all have that basic understanding is we have this very vital time with kiddos to be able to help build and nurture and help them thrive versus having them go into that adult system and have all of these more extenuating risk factors. So I know at this point in time, I still feel that, that prosecutor involvement is super vital to the structure that we have because it solidifies and supports the tribe and even the department saying that we're all seeing that, attendance is something that we stand behind and we're all coming together, not just in words, but in code and in system as well, that we are taking a stand to try to eradicate this from our community.
Thank you so much. Anna, you were going to introduce Kelly Arnold for some comments.
Yes, so we had several participants in session 1 and some really great discussion. And in our downloads pod, you will see a couple of documents that were shared by one of our session 1 participants. 2 of those are Kelly Arnold. One was a truancy policy and another was a sample school attendance ordinance. And really it was just to kind of share what one community is doing, but we've invited Kelly to jump on and share a little bit about the incentives that are offered to their youth as part of their truancy prevention program. So with that, Kelly, if you're on and your sound is working, you are welcome to discuss a little bit about your program, and then we can give Johanna and Annette a little time to breathe and answer some more questions before we wrap this up.
Okay, so what I did was there is the school attendance ordinance in the files, as you had mentioned, and that is the law that we follow here. And then we also have a handbook policy that we are implementing as of this year, that our school board and our tribal council have approved. And what that looks like is that when a student hits a set number of unexcused absences or tardies to school, there are letters sent. So the first letter is an initial warning letter, letting the parents know where the student is at attendance-wise. And in the past, we did try to only just have absences, not excused or unexcused, because missed instruction. However, that became a little too overwhelming here in the beginning, so we went back to, after 2 years, we went back to the unexcused only. And then after a student hits 6 unexcused absences or 8 morning tardies, we have a meeting with the family, if the student is old enough, and the administrator, usually the principal, to go over any school issues they might be having. What can we do? Is there problems? Is there a busing issue, anything like that, so that we can try and prevent any more absences? If that doesn't work, once a student hits 10 unexcused absences or 12 morning tardies, then they would make a referral over to myself as the truancy officer. And at that point, I would schedule a meeting with myself, our school liaison officer, the family, and the student, again, if they were old enough, and the prosecutor, to explain the law in Hannahville and what is required and what can we do to assist you. Are there any obstacles? Sometimes this is where we discuss Healthy Homes Program, which is a family preservation program through social services. Sometimes it's as easy as an alarm clock. People are using their cell phones for alarm clocks. They go dead or they jump. We're right on a time change line, so we can give them alarm clocks. We offer behavioral health services, substance abuse or use in our victim services program, and sometimes that's making connections. Or it could be as easy as offering to get them assistance to get Medicaid so that they're able to start going to the dentist or getting their medical needs met, things like that. So it's really a prevention piece there. And then if a student continues to be absent and we have more unexcused absences or tardies, that's when I would file a petition for a court hearing, forward the information to our Hannahville Police Department for a possible ticket, and as well as to Protective Services and our Child Welfare Board. And at that point, we look at the case very closely, see what we can do, what's causing the absences, how we can assist with that. And then the court kind of takes it from there, and we offer services. At this point, it's not a voluntary offer of services. They will be ordered to either to get their medical needs met, dental needs, behavioral health, substance use, anything like that will be ordered at that point. And then we have, if there is excessive excused absences, that's where I would investigate to find out, are those appointments being made to make sure that the parents just aren't calling to excuse. And we do have a list of what is excused and unexcused. Our tribal council had made a list of those, which would be like a death in the community or family member, medical appointment, dental appointment, those types of things. So, and then on the other side, we do have the incentive program that I'm also very passionate about. And one more piece before the incentive is that we have a welcome back letter at the start of the school year that I sent to any family where truancy was an issue the year before, welcoming them back, asking them to remember that I'm here to help, anything I can do to assist them, and give them some resources, reminding them some ideas to promote attendance and learning, such as bedtimes, setting things up ahead of time the night before, that kind of thing, and letting them know I'm here to help support them to get their student to school every day. And if parents are doing well once they're in the truancy process, there's been improvement. I send a congratulations postcard in the mail saying, way to go, keep up the good work, so that they actually get some good mail telling them they're doing a great job instead of a more negative letter. And then we also made up magnets of the truancy process just to have people have it on their fridge as a reminder. to kind of hopefully promote more attendance and less of the absences. And so to the attendance incentive program, it's time consuming, but it's very rewarding, and I think we've seen a lot of success where students are rewarded every single week, and for that part of it, they have to have perfect attendance. So 4 times in a month is what it breaks down to. So if they have perfect attendance, they are entered in a drawing, and I go into their individual classrooms. So I've worked this out with all the teachers, set up a time, and I go into their classroom with a cart that has maybe some yogurt, some pudding, or just a variety of, I try to lean towards the healthier snacks on the cart. And so I will pick 4 names from that classroom who had perfect attendance in the last month. And then they get to come pick out a prize. So there's 4 winners per classroom. And then for the end of the month, whichever classroom had the best attendance, they get a trophy. And with that trophy, they get a special treat. Sometimes they'll have a box of suckers because, or fruit by the foot, putting your best foot forward. So everybody in that class gets that treat, and they get the trophy for the classroom for that whole month, kind of like bragging rights. And then we have term and semester rewards, where we don't just focus on perfect attendance, we focus on good attendance. So if you have perfect attendance during that time, you will have an elevated prize that you get to choose from. But if you have good attendance, which I suggest is 3 or less morning tardies, 2 or less absences in that time frame. And during that time, they can come down to the youth center and they get to pick out a prize. Could be a bag of chips, could be a little palette of makeup, could be a Gatorade. It's a variety of different things that the kids tell me what they like, and I get to go shopping and bring them to them for them to choose. The other piece is that we have a family attendance prize basket, because attendance really is a family. If it's important to the family, it's going to be important to that student. They're going to have good attendance. So what we'll do is we will have a gift basket, and I have one for K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12th grades. And for any student who had perfect attendance during a term marking period, they are put in a drawing, and then we draw a name. That student then gets to come and pick out that prize basket. I've done things such as cookie sheets, cookies, spatulas, a gift card for a local grocery store so that they can make cookies together, and then there'll be a movie in there. Or it could be something like board games and puzzles, or coloring, or an art kit, just different things that a family can do together and spend time together. So that's one other piece that we offer as well. And I think I covered just about everything with our incentives.
Thank you so much. I asked Kelly pretty close to this session if she would join us, because she did share a little bit about their program, and I felt like it's nice to hear some comparisons of what programs are doing and some real, hands-on examples of, here's how we implemented a rewards process, or here's, the ways that we try to incentivize attendance. And so thank you so much, Kelly, for jumping on and sharing. And our hope is that this series will continue. We will be presenting a 3rd session as part of this series, probably right at the start of next year. So look for a session in January 2020. And we hope that what's been shared today will continue building off of. And so I'm going to pass it back to Ethleen and Tasha. They're going to continue bringing up some of these questions you all have asked, and we'll move forward till the end of our session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. There was a request for your flow chart, and the presenters have agreed to send that out to us, and then we can send it out to you all. So, and we're also making comments on the side about how we really need a nuts and bolts type of session where people can, share forms or share flow charts or share, procedures, and I think that's a really good idea. So, Tasha, are there any other questions?
Let me see. I'm looking here. The discussion seems really good. I like that you all are all sharing and thinking about how you might implement some of these things in your own communities. Let me see here. Most of these that I'm seeing are just comments between them. Was there a specific question you're referring to?
I didn't see any other specific questions either, but I really appreciate, all of the discussion and people sharing things. And speaking of sharing, there's a Tribal Youth and Truancy Prevention resource sheet for your information, and it has some really good information in there that you might want to take a look at, and that is available for download. So
yeah, so
other
definitely.
than that, I think that's about it, right?
Yeah, and I could jump in. I'm sorry. Could I kind of jump in with Ms. Ethleen when you're talking about the nuts and bolts of truancy response? I know that it is a huge component, and like we said in the beginning, there is not one silver bullet that works for one community, one family, or just truancy as a whole, but just looking at practices and sharing them, I think even ourselves in that practice, we would even appreciate having opportunities to share and exchange learning opportunities with other relatives in other communities that are also working with that. But there was one element that I did want to share, and that was something that we implemented and expanded on since the inception of the program, and those were monthly staffings. And those staffings have been very fruitful for us. And what we do is we have a staffing with key stakeholders in the organization that, such as behavioral health and social services, probation and prosecutor's office, and our behavioral health, that come together, and that's where we activate and navigate referrals that are taking place when we're working with families that are at a capacity that might be at a higher risk that we need immediate action or follow-up on. So that's where social services will come in and do interventions at that child welfare level with some of our families, because at this time when we're getting referrals, sometimes that's an indicator of a whole lot of other issues going on that the school was not even aware of. We just knew that there was excessive absences, but that was it. So having that internal process of partnership within a staffing unit to be able to exchange that information is definitely vital to that communication piece within an organization. Another layer is a support staffing, and the support staffing are more of the prevention and restorative departments and programs within the tribe, where we're exchanging what services are being made available to families and how they can access services. And then we have program staff that are connecting and plugging in families to those services right there and then, or providing basic contact information for these programs to contact the family to extend a personal invitation for them to become active into those engagements and services. And that could range from educational services. They provide either tutoring, homework help, exceptional education guidance, advising. It could just be behavioral health or parenting courses, youth leadership organizations, substance abuse support, all of those things. So having two layers of staffings with two different levels of stakeholders are definitely been beneficial for us to keep the priority of moving forward and the attendance achievement objectives kind of hot on the trail of us moving forward with families and keeping that the priority for them.
Thank you so much. And just as a final point in closing the discussion and the questions, last night I went to a wiping of tears ceremony at one of our local schools here in Porcupine, South Dakota, on the Pine Ridge Reservation, and it was an acknowledgement of the grief and the loss that children, youth their families experience, over the summer, and that is definitely, a factor in truancy and academic, performance and achievement. So I really appreciated that the school took the time to do the wiping of tears ceremony for their students, their families, for those who chose to participate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tasha and Anna, and we talked about the resource sheet, so you have the downloads there. And so with that,
thanks. I'm going to actually go back one more slide. This is Tasha. So, I think that we've, throughout this presentation, that we have accomplished a lot of the things that we set out to do as far as our learning objectives. And one thing that I really liked that Johanna and Annette talked about was that we want our kids to not view school as an outside entity, as something they're not a part of. And so really incorporating that they belong there and that there are good things that can come from there. And so I know that we also touched on a lot of other things as far as relationship building. And I think that these programs have really shown how you can collaborate both within the tribal community and outside, and how effective it is when we all come together to support our children. And so for our closing, that's why we chose these images, because this, and those of us who have had, an educational journey that may have had bumps or may have gone smoothly, we know that no matter what, it's a journey and there are always going to be challenges. And so when we look at our children, this bottom picture is a picture of my youngest daughter when she started kindergarten. And then the young woman is my cousin, and she graduated from high school last year. And so we have to remember that they're on this long journey and that's the goal. So, and then this young man is my nephew, and he just started kindergarten this year, and we want him to reach this point where he can, obtain a diploma and, wear his feather with pride and wear his tribal stole and those kinds of things. And so I encourage you to think about youth within your own communities. Imagine, the youngest that you have, and then those who are going on, hopefully, to college, and just to remember that journey and how important your work is to that. And, we appreciate you, and I know that the kids will eventually come to realize, the impact that each of you has had on them. And so, as we mentioned, the resource sheet is going to be available. It's down here in the files. It will also be available at tribalyouth.org, as well as the flow charts and things that we have talked about in the discussion today. We do encourage you to join us for our next online learning event, Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment, that will have a special guest, Evan Elkin, and it will be facilitated by Precious Benali. So to register, there's a link there, and you can also go to tribalyouthprogram.org.
Thank you, Tasha. I just want to reiterate that we are so glad that you all were able to join us today, and also thank our guest presenters for their time and for their expertise and for sharing. And we look forward to continuing this series, and we invite you all to stay on our newsletter and our outreach so that you can be informed of when a session will be coming up. And yes, please join our next online learning event, which is next week at the same time. You can register for that. You can also visit our website to get these materials and other resources anytime. So with that, this is just some more information about the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. This is the house currently for the Tribal Youth Resource Center, and we do have a partnership with the National Native Children's Trauma Center. So if you're interested in integrating trauma-informed care within your truancy prevention program, please contact us because we are able to provide on-site and virtual training related to trauma-informed care. And we wanted to quickly share that there is an evaluation. Please share your thoughts and comments about today's session. We appreciate your feedback. We do utilize that to improve all the work that we do, and we appreciate your honesty, and we hope that you enjoyed today's session and that you were able to receive some information that will be helpful to you in your programming. If you have any other questions, feel free to save those in the chat box. We can follow up with you via email. If you are interested in any other resources from the Tribal Youth Resource Center, do not hesitate to contact us. And again, thank you so much to Johanna and Annette and Kelly for all that you shared today. Also to Tasha and Ethleen for engaging with our participants, and we look forward to you participating in our next online learning event next week. So with that, we have concluded today's session. We hope you have a good rest of your week, and thank you so much